Hi, I'm Allie Zendrian. I'm the editor-in-chief of Brand News, and this is the Financial Services News You Might Have Missed podcast. This is where I find news gems that might not have gotten their full chance to sparkle, and I dust them off a little bit. I'm joined by my trusted financial advisor and my co-host, Brandon Galisi of Galisi Financial. Brandon, how's your week been? I hear that there are some exciting golf clubs in your future.
That's true. Yeah. So I just got some clubs delivered. I was expecting it to be a few more weeks. And then I got another email that said it was delayed and not supposed to come until mid-May, which it's April 2nd as of when we're recording this. So I was pretty bummed. But then turns out they got some extra ones in stock and they just arrived via FedEx. So they're in hand. And now I just have to go to a local golf shop, get them regripped. And we'll be hitting the driving range this Easter weekend, no doubt. So, but what about you?
Good. So Easter weekend, we spend with my family. Fortunately, my middle sister is a very good cook. So there are going to be Easter icons galore and good food. But today in particular is Pluto's half birthday. And I started as a tradition with our other dog, Prince, on his half birthday and then every subsequent birthday, that they get to go to the pet store and they can pick whatever they want. And I buy it. Which, when I took Prince at 6 months old, I'm pretty sure that the bill was an amount that I was not expecting. So at least now I know what I'm expecting.
Fair. And so what's the exact process? So you go to the pet store. How do you tell what Pluto's picking out?
So Prince, anyway, was like very deliberate. Although toward the end, he wasn't. And we were sort of like, please, do you want to take this one? This one, I feel like we can't leave with nothing. But yeah, usually whatever he like tries to eat or slobber on, we just buy.
Fair. Sounds like a very intentional process.
Well, we'll see how it goes. I will report back. So as Brandon mentioned, this is Easter week. So we will be taking next week off. So I will report back to you when we get back in 2 weeks.
All right. Yeah. Looking forward to it.
Cool. So our first piece of news this week is from Daffy, which became the first giving platform to support both public and private stock employer matching. This came about through the Daffy for Work program, where companies can set up match ratios, caps, and contribution types. And just to show how successful this program could be, when Figma had its IPO, employees set aside more than, I believe, $1 million in stock. I thought that this was interesting. I know that we've talked before on the podcast about student loan matching and things like that. I think this is another creative way to attract and retain your workforce, but would love to get your thoughts.
I found it to be really cool. And even in the geek in me, the financial planner, likes how they're doing it, because I know that there are certain companies, like my wife's, for example, where she can send money or go into her HR portal or whatever, and then have a qualified charity get X amount of dollars that essentially is coming straight from the company. So slightly different than the matching concept, but that takes the remembering of the employee. Then they have to go through the system. And I don't know what those systems are typically like. Whereas this, with that donor advised fund, once money goes into the donor advised fund, say the employee contributes, it's going to be much easier to match that. And then now the employee at some point in the future will be able to direct those to a qualified charity of their choice. So even the functionality on how this works, to me, makes a lot of sense. It seems like it will really simplify things. And if you can simplify things, I would assume then more people are more likely to opt in, more companies to something like this. So I thought it was great.
Yeah. It's also interesting. So I feel like the allowance of both public and private, it seems like now basically charities and lots of other functions are just saying, give us your stuff. We will figure out how we accept it, but just give it to us. So I guess that's a good thing.
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of it, I mean, I talk a lot in my content about if you're already charitably inclined, if you're already going to give 10 grand, for example, and you have shares of appreciated stock that you've held for at least a year, you're able to donate that, assuming you itemize, write off that amount, and also save any capital gains tax that you would have paid. And then the charity or church of your choice gets all of that money tax free. They're not having to worry about capital gains too. So it's a way to give even more efficiently. And to your point, Ali, yes, way more churches and charities, I think, are taking stock, crypto, and the like. But even for those that don't, it's actually this donor advised fund, this DAF here, that even if they don't, you could transfer your stock into there, sell it, no capital gains, and then send out the cash. So a DAF makes it easier probably for some of these smaller organizations to even accept stock, essentially.
Well, I love the tax advice, especially as we are almost at the end of tax season, which is hard to believe. But thank you. Greatly appreciated.
Yeah. Absolutely. Just sometimes if you're like, okay, that's enough, that's too much tax advice, too much tax talk, just tell me to pump the brakes, because I can go all day.
No, that was very helpful. I hope to one day take advantage of it, but it's definitely not this year. So our second piece of news caught my eye thanks to the headline, which was AI hasn't saved miserable CX teams after all. There was a lot going on in this headline that was interesting to me. The concept for the headline came from Front's latest research that showed that many B2B teams are still coordinating a greater deal of their tasks and work, even though they have AI. So I thought that this was interesting because we've discussed on the podcast, is AI an efficiency saver? Is it going to even get to the point that it would save personnel because it's just doing so much? Why would you need an employee to do this? So this seemed to be weighing into that area, and I'd love to get your take.
Yeah, I found it really interesting as well. One of the quotes from the article said, teams spend nearly 3 times as long coordinating work than solving customer issues. And I'm like, whoa, we're taking this much longer. We're not even getting efficiencies. Like you mentioned, Allie, we talk all the time about the efficiencies that AI can help with and the right implementation and being intentional with it. But if you're spending more time coordinating, and again, I don't know if that's more time at the beginning as some of these companies and teams build out the process and there's a learning curve and they're just kind of at the beginning of that. So it's expanding time, or if this is truly something that you're going to spend just as much time managing and coordinating people, then what's AI doing, at least in this particular use case?
Yeah, exactly. To your point, neither one of us is there to be able to analyze and to say, it seems like you're maybe managing this process poorly, or, maybe you're not using AI in the way that it ought to be used. But yeah, it does, I guess, call into question whether maybe certain areas don't really need AI. Maybe it is just that much more complicated, or like you said, AI is new to the workforce. Maybe we all just got to figure it out a little faster.
Right. And I think it's trial and error, but at a certain point in this case, if it truly is taking you 3 times the amount of, again, if you're a customer service team and you're spending triple the amount of time on processes of any sort, let alone when AI is used, it's like, okay, we probably need to be asking questions. And again, hopefully people are, to see if it's one of those issues that we've already talked about. But yeah, I'm like, geez, AI saves me time. I don't know what's going on over here.
Right? Yeah, it does make you wonder. So this also brought up for me, at least I've had the experience with Nitrogen. We discussed their agentic AI a few weeks ago called Nucleus. This is where it's really giving, and it was a great way that Nitrogen explained it. It's giving AI the hands so that it's not just the brain that's thinking of these fabulous things. It's actually going around and doing the things. So I thought that perhaps maybe that kind of AI could be deployed in this case. Or it also made me think of MCPs, the modern context protocols. Some groups like, I know this week I saw Zox, and I believe whether it was this week or last, Carson announced that they have an MCP. Advisor Pro announced that back in December. So connecting things so much better so that hopefully if you need X to communicate with Y, it's doing it itself versus you trying to like scooch it over or otherwise coordinate things and waste your own time.
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, I'm not an expert in agentic AI, but sounds like that it could at least be something that would be part of the asking questions. Hey, how are we losing this efficiency? Could agentic AI or something else come into play? But I think at least at a minimum, questions need to be asked, because it should not be drastically improving or taking much longer to do things, at least over the long run. Once you get through the learning curve, it should be more efficient, or quite frankly, it wasn't a good implementation of it.
Yeah, good point. So our last two pieces of news are surveys, which any loyal listener of this podcast knows I enjoy. The first of which is from First Command, which showed that military families are more financially confident than their civilian counterparts. What I thought was interesting is that this survey found that 69% of military households anticipate they'll be able to retire comfortably. And that compared to 40% in civilian cases. So that's a decent, almost 30% chunk right there. And then 49% of military families are feeling financially secure month to month compared to 30% of civilians. So I would love to get your thoughts on, why this difference could be. It didn't seem like there were any notes in there necessarily to explain other than, and I will tee this up for you, basically working with a financial advisor.
Yeah. So I haven't worked with tons and tons of military families over the years, but I have worked with at least a few. So I think I would want to know a little bit more context on who exactly they're talking to. Are they talking to folks that plan to essentially retire from the military? Because if that's the case, and I can't even off the top of my head remember how many years that is, but I do know once they get out, there could potentially be a pretty solid pension in place, depending on the veteran's time in the force. There could be disability payments going out, all sorts of things, where if there's increased guaranteed income, or even right now expected guaranteed income, like a pension, like VA disability, things like that. And also healthcare costs oftentimes can get covered by the VA depending on the unique situation. That's a lot of pretty big expenses and a lot of guaranteed income that we're talking about here, that even if they're not receiving that yet, just the fact they have a plan to probably makes them feel a lot better versus, and not to tee up too much for the next one, but since most people don't have pensions, they're not in that boat. They do have pensions, assuming they stay for their full military career.
Yeah. So another thing that I wanted to tee up for you, and the reason that I really thought that this article was great, it also showed a comparison between military families that work with a financial advisor versus the ones that don't. The First Command survey showed that military families working with an advisor contributed more than $400 more to their monthly savings than those who didn't work with an advisor. And the average long-term savings and retirement balances for those people, for the military families who had financial advisors, was close to $100,000 apart from the civilians who didn't use a financial advisor. So, I mean, those are sizable differences. And if it's just the fact that you're working with a professional who can guide you in the right direction, that to me says go for it.
I think that really is a lot of it. Of course, I'm biased, and I want more people to consider working with a financial advisor. Of course, I mean that's literally my profession, but I think it makes a lot of sense. I recently shared a piece of content on social media. The hook was, would you be surprised to know that people that work with a personal trainer typically are more healthy? Probably not, because if you're paying a personal trainer, if nothing else, you're staying more engaged, you're probably missing less workouts, you might be eating a little bit healthier. Again, not guaranteed, but if you look across the board, people with a personal trainer are probably going to be healthier because they're just going to do some of those healthy behaviors. I think same thing what we see in finance. If you're working with an advisor, your money is maybe a little bit more top of mind. You've got more of an intentional plan behind it. You've got a why around the reason that you're even saving and investing X% of your income. So all those things make sense to me. And I'm going to tee up for you. What are your thoughts from this? I've been talking a lot on this episode.
No, well, I mean, I basically tried to make a layup for you. So I don't know. Maybe I alley-ooped. I don't know.
Alley-oops. I like that one.
I will be here for 2 weeks. But anyway, I was curious if even something like the military, generally speaking, has more rigor and protocols and whatnot in place. So does that kind of behavior feed into a person's financial life that then says, but I have to save whatever it is, 10% every single month, and I have to do it because it's orders and this is what I do, versus the average person who's like, I should, but also like I could do whatever else. Maybe that's part of it.
I fully agree with you. I feel like that psychologically, again, without seeing additional data, has to impact it to some degree. Because even the military families that didn't have an advisor were still saving roughly $1,500 a month. And Granted, I don't exactly know what incomes are, but let's even assume $100,000 of income. That's 18% a year is being saved. I think the average savings rate in America it's different each time, but anywhere from 5 to 8%, I think, even including employer match, somewhere around there. So even the non-financial advisor, the family that's not working with an advisor, I think to your point, just has a lot more discipline, and somewhere along the line, they've started saving and they're not going to change it because they're just disciplined. So I think you're totally correct.
Well, then maybe I'll learn from that discipline because that would be incredibly helpful.
For sure.
So our last piece of news that we're going to talk about this week is from Global Atlantic, which Brandon was starting to tee up for us. This one caught my eye because of the headline, Gen Xers approaching retirement are more anxious than boomers. 28% of those 55 to 60, which is considered the first wave of Gen X, are extremely or very concerned about outliving their earnings compared to 14% of boomers. So double the amount right there. And then 48% of Gen Xers said they expect to come back to the workforce after retirement, which was more than double that of boomers at 21%. I would love to get your thoughts on what's going on with Gen X here.
Yeah, I feel like they've been referred to as the sandwich generation, where they might be taking care of either their baby boomer or the silent generation above them. Yes. Whoever's above, okay, perfect. The silent generation above. So they potentially were in the process of both taking care of their parents, maybe financially, but even if not financially, still making a lot of the decisions for care and those types of things, a lot of stress associated with that. Then also they might have had growing children, maybe even in college, that they're still supporting, still on the payroll, if you will. So I feel like because of that could have contracted some of their savings rates over their lifetime. You also add the fact that less and less companies offer pensions, whereas boomers likely had a much higher chance of getting access to a pension. That probability just keeps going lower and lower. But Gen X was probably one of the first generations that it started to massively decline, whereas us millennials were like, pension, what's that? Never heard of it, not planning on it. So it wasn't almost in our foresight. So those are a few of my takes, but what are your thoughts?
So it is so sad that with our generation, it does feel like really you have a pension? How'd you pull that one off? And then it made me think, in some of these circumstances, people that have pensions, it's like, would it almost be better than to, just get in the system and, take a lesser paying job, but get that pension versus, be doing what we're doing? I don't know. But the other thing that I was thinking about in terms of these generations is I wonder to what extent, so boomers arguably either should be retired or are on that cusp and will be
Right.
retiring. So is it maybe just you've already done your retirement planning? You had that conversation of, am I going to outlive or not? And maybe you feel like you're already satisfied with the answer versus Gen X that I guess is anxiously waiting for the conversation to come up. That was my other thought.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Boomers have probably had more of that retirement planning conversations, and I didn't write it down. I was looking through my notes, and I don't see it here, but I had seen something of Gen X hasn't built, even though folks are worried about retirement, they haven't built an intentional retirement income plan.
Mm.
So with that in mind, the uncertainty for any human being, we do not like. It causes stress and anxiety. And if it's just, I'm going to retire someday. And again, as millennials, it's like, it is someday, it still is further out. But if you're within 5 to 7 years and you have zero plan and maybe you feel like you're behind the eight ball, you may or may not be. But if you don't have a plan, you don't have clarity, you're going to assume the worst because you don't have an awareness of where you are and how to get there.
Yeah. But so then to that point, I mean, I guess should there steadily be conversations that you're having if you are working with a professional? So in my case, I'm 41. I'm not thinking about retirement right now. I've got many more pressing things to deal with at the minute, but should we be having the conversation at 45, at 50, at 50? Do you steadily do that? Is that overkill? I don't know.
I think usually it's more, I'm at least a fan of doing more of a basic type of projection versus, won't get into all of it, but instead of doing a Monte Carlo right now for a lot of millennials who most don't know what it is, and no matter how good you explain it, someone could see an 85% probability of success. And no matter how great of a communicator you are, in the back of their mind, there's a 15% chance that they're destitute living under a bridge, even if 85% might be sufficient. So I think it's reframing that where what can we actually control right now? And for the most part, that's our savings rate. How much are we saving? How much are we investing? At our current savings rate in 20 years from now, is that in the ballpark of where we think we might need to be to retire? Again, we're not trying to get down to the penny. We're not trying to be prescriptive and see what your utility bills are going to be in 20 or 25 years, because that's a fool's game right there. And there's a lot of assumptions we have to make. But is there anything drastic that we're like, whoa, we really think that we're underfunded? We need to do what we can and make it a priority to invest a bit more. Because if, in my humble opinion, if projections don't help you either confirm behavior or change behavior in the present, then it was pointless.
Agreed. So what just came into my mind for whatever reason was, so with Gen X, so this feeling of like the hopelessness and the concern and whatnot, is it that, either they don't think that the great wealth transfer is coming for them, or is it just that, I can't factor in something that like may or may not happen. So I have to deal with my own reality. And then if some, magical sum falls from the heavens, like great. But otherwise, given what I presently understand, I may or may not have a problem. I feel like that's an interesting, we keep saying like, oh, the great wealth transfer. And well, apparently the numbers are saying I'm not really factoring that in, or even that's not good enough.
Yeah, no, it's funny, even how you said it, the great wealth transfer, because we just keep hearing that in the industry, right? It is like this buzz phrase. And it's like, I don't know, you look around and like, yeah, of course, there's constantly people inheriting money, but it hasn't felt great
No,
at least
no,
necessarily, which
maybe little
hopefully is
wealth transfer.
right. Yeah, right now it's been a small wealth transfer, which is good. Hopefully that means parents and loved ones are living longer and healthier lives. Hopefully that's what that means. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it's, I think like you said, the long way to put it is what I have just done. The shorter version was they're not necessarily counting for it, or they don't know what that might be. Tie that with the uncertainty, and they just don't feel very good about retirement, as at least what the data is showing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope that they get some level of resolution because, to your point, look, if you're going to sit with that feeling in your stomach and then it's fueling how you do at your job, how you're relating to your family, anything that you could possibly do, may as well do whatever you can to alleviate that issue. So whether that's seek financial help professionally or just otherwise sort it out, may you find that level of resolution.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you as always for this fabulous advice, tax and retirement and everything wrapped together.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the alley oop earlier. It's even better that you made that joke. We are during March Madness when we're recording this too, so I know that might be up there. I can't name them off the top of my head, but I'm gonna say that's one of the top 5 jokes on the podcast. So I thought that was great, and today was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you. Although now I feel challenged. Like maybe I should put together, since we don't have next week, a bloopers or best jokes reel. Although that's
Oh,
going to be quite time consuming. We'll see if and when this happens.
yeah, maybe. Yeah, I love the concept, but yeah, don't spend too much time doing that. But that would be funny to see, just the bloopers and yeah, I think that the best jokes. But that one's for sure in my top 5.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. We'll have a great week.
You too. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Allie.